Well, joining us today, we have the Athletic writers Jack Pitt-Brooke and also Jacob Whitehead, who were in Gelsenkirchen to watch the England game for us yesterday. Jack, let's start with you. England are through to the quarterfinals of Euro 2024 by the skin of their teeth, I need to mention. But from your piece today, England were also very close to being, I guess, in a position where they repeated that moment in 2016, which saw England knocked out by Iceland. I looked at your Instagram profile today. Your face said it all, mate. But with all the smiles with Gareth Southgate in the press conference, was it all smiles or was it a bit strange?
It was a bit strange because when he walked in, I felt like I'd seen a ghost. I felt like this shouldn't have gone like this. Like he was sat in the press conference smiling away, talking about everything they'd done in the week, and is Luke Shaw going to be fit for Switzerland, and what's the plans for next week? And I just thought and he must have known this. You were this close to having a completely different experience. Because England were like 99.9% of the way to a full Iceland, and then somehow Jude Bellingham managed to rescue Southgate. And then all of a sudden, but if that hadn't happened, then it would have been, will you resign, Gareth? You've let your country down. The whole mood would have been like the polar opposite. England would now, I think, be flying back to the UK. It would be almost impossible to see how Gareth Southgate could continue as England manager after that. It would be, I think, the end of the Gareth Southgate era. Because nobody would be giving him a new contract after getting knocked out to Slovakia. And so it was just weird sitting there having that sense that what we were watching and experiencing was so different from and so unlikely compared to the scenario that we were all expecting as we watched the game. Like England were completely, England were completely saved from certain doom by that Bellingham goal.
Jacob, Harry Kane said at post-match that, it's a results game and they got the result. That's all that matters, right? England are through to the next round of the Euros. They live to play another day.
It is, and it isn't. I suppose if there's last-minute bicycle kicks and which create 1-0, 2-1 wins the whole way to Berlin, then people will probably be fine with it. But they played incredibly poorly. And before the game, I was speaking with Athletic's Ollie Kay, and we're almost talking about how it was a little bit of a no-win situation for Southgate. Either they lose, and I'll borrow Jack's phrase of going full Iceland because I liked it so much, or they sort of won unconvincingly, and the only way in which they would kind of emerge with any sort of credit, because it is, quote, only Slovakia, what a sort of misname of that was, would be through winning 3 or 4-0. And in the end, it turned out that there's another way out, which was to win in a way which is so sort of fantastical that sort of pure moment overshadows the sort of dearth of the rest of the performance.
I guess, it's that overwhelmingness that's really been interesting in the tournament. And did we see any remarkable improvements from the group stage at all, Jacob, in any way, shape or form, anything redeeming from England?
Not in totality. There are moments which were good. I think Kobbie Mainoo had moments where you saw how he got England moving forwards, playing under half turn, but at the same time, it felt like other players got worse around him. And for me, one of the most troubling things was the body language for most of the game. I mean, the amount of times we talk about a French shrug. I mean, it was a very anglicised version of it for 90 minutes. The image which really stays in my head is after 87 minutes, Jordan Pickford caught a long shot from Lobotka and sprinted to the edge of his area to try and fling the ball out to his players, and no one was making a run. They were just standing there. And the fact that was the case with 5 minutes left, really, I thought they're doomed. And the idea that it was a long throw, which did it before that sheer moment of beauty, is at the same time, it's both beautiful and damning, because it's sort of something which they hadn't worked on, and sort of relying on a sheer moment rather than any sort of system to get them out of trouble.
Yeah, I thought England were worse in every department yesterday. I didn't think they could play worse than they did against Denmark and Slovenia, but they really found a way because they took everything they did badly in the previous games in the group stage. Couldn't keep the ball, couldn't play through the opposition press, couldn't turn possession into chances, no outlet, unbalanced midfield. And they added on top of that being really bad defensively, which they hadn't done in the past. You know, they were so open on the break. The goal was an absolute mess. And I agree with Jacob. Like, my main mental image of the game yesterday is an England player on the ball under pressure, not having any options either side of him, waving his arms in air in anger at his teammates, thinking, I don't want the ball. Why don't you take it? You take it off me. I don't want the ball at my feet. And then eventually either giving it away or getting tackled by a Slovakian player or just shouting at one of his teammates for putting him in that position, or all of the above. Like, they looked like they looked so panicked at the fact that they had to come out there and play a football match. And that's what I think brought it back so much to Iceland, is that you could really see the fear on the England players, particularly in that first hour or so. I actually think they did settle down a bit in the second half. But in the first half, like they really, a lot of them looked like they didn't want to be there, and that is a really damning thing to say about a Euros knockout game.
Yeah, Jack, were you surprised by the starting lineup? I mean, I think Mainu was really the only additional change to that starting lineup. You know, this is a team that's been criticised for a lack of fluidity and unbalance. Players not being really up for it, all those kind of things. And still, Gareth Southgate seems to stick with the same men so far.
Well, yes and no. Like, I was surprised in the sense that England have got a lot of problems that they haven't fixed, but I wasn't surprised because in the press conference on Saturday, I asked Gareth, you know, are you looking for small tweaks or big changes going into this game? He basically said small tweaks. He said, you know, we don't want to disrupt what we've been doing so far. So, and you know, if it hadn't been that Bellingham goal, a lot of people would be saying this morning, why didn't he fix the problems in the team? Because he hasn't shown any. He hasn't fixed any of the problems in the team, and yet somehow they still managed to get away with it. But and that really brings us to wondering: is he going to try and fix these problems this week? He's got a lot of time between now and the Switzerland game on Saturday afternoon, where maybe he could start to think about, you know, are we going to play with the left side now? How are we going to build out from the back? Are we going to have an outlet better than Kieran Trippier? But at the moment, it's given that he's stuck pretty doggedly with these players so far, I wonder whether it will be basically the same team in the quarters.
I think one of the weird things for Southgate last night was that the players who struggled in terms of not reaching their own performance levels were some of his key players in his team, which makes it very hard for him to actually make any changes. I mean, I think for the majority of that game, Kane was poor, Bellingham was poor, and Rice was poor. They did turn this around at the end quite extremely in Bellingham's case, but it kind of led to Southgate also having to make these very kind of odd substitutions, and he kind of left with this sort of hilarious kind of 3-1-6 at the end of normal time, which eventually settled into quite a pragmatic 5-3-2, but with kind of Eze as wing back, which was quite entertaining. But that's kind of why it feels hard for Southgate to solve. It's not like there's a couple of players in the fringe of the squad where he can sub out and everything will be fine. He needs to find a way to get his most important players firing. And if they're not doing that in an England shirt, it kind of points to something kind of deeper within this squad and their motivations.
Let's talk about Jude Bellingham. We've mentioned it a few times, that moment of magic. A la Gascoigne Euro 96, you know, it was really something special. But also, I guess, Jacob, a player that hasn't really performed at his optimum in this tournament. But when he did score, you know, that celebration, he was mouthing, who else, pointing at himself, doing the chatter sign with his hand. This is a lad that can back himself.
It's been such a strange tournament for Jude Bellingham in the sense that in the first game against Serbia, first half especially, he was pretty much kind of taking on the Serbian team on his own. And I do think that sometimes, because it's been such a poor general performance, that he has sort of felt the need to play a bit of hero ball, take it on himself, and then that's not necessarily helped his game at Real Madrid. He's got great players around him, and of course Bellingham is a brilliant player himself, but that kind of facilitates and empowers him. That system hasn't been there for England, but yet I suppose when you do play hero ball, eventually you are going to be the hero, and Bellingham's got the talent to back that up. He mouthed who else, and I think the kind of, as much as that possibly says about the cohesion of the England squad, we know, and he knows that we know, that he was probably right.
Jack, hero ball's dangerous, man. Especially in tournaments like this. You can't surely rely on these. I mean, we love it as football fans, but you can't rely on these beautiful moments because, against another type of opposition, England will get punished.
It's not even just like the physical and athletic skill to pull it off. It's the confidence to try that when you've been pretty substandard for 95 minutes. I thought Bellingham was, Southgate said in the press conference afterwards that with 15 minutes left, he was thinking, should I hook Bellingham and Kane just because they look so exhausted? I spent a lot of the game thinking Bellingham's going to get himself sent off here. Because do you remember he got that silly booking in the first half, and after he got booked, he put his hands on the referee. And I thought as soon as he did that, I was thinking, oh my God, he's going to get sent off already. It's like Rooney 2006 all over again, and in the same stadium, and so to play that badly, and to be honest, I thought he was really bad against Slovenia. I thought he was bad against Denmark as well. Obviously, had a great start against Serbia, and then to just pull that out of the bag was unbelievable. Like, it is almost that's my main memory of last night. Is it's almost literally unbelievable to see that. I still think that the way that England plays, I think, going to get punished against Switzerland. But then they've got away with it so far, so maybe they will continue getting away with it.
With England players looking like they're playing so far within themselves, that Bellingham might have thought, hang on, I could do a bicycle kick, but the sort of lasting image of this tournament here could be me in a crumpled heap upside down on the floor, having shinned it wide with a minute left, which is effectively England's last chance to stay in the European Championships. And look, that's a lot of thoughts to go through in that moment. But players were playing as if they were thinking about, what's my reputation going to be after this match? Am I going to have been the player who made the error, who kicked off? That didn't matter to him at that moment, and I think that's why he puts himself into position so many times to do that.
Yeah, I guess you do feel that this is a player that thinks about all of these things in terms of his media persona and how he tries to conduct himself on the field. That quote at the end of the match, when the reporter asks him, who writes your scripts, and Bellingham just goes, I do. You get that, dare I say, a sense of self-importance. But this is a player that just doesn't want to turn up on the pitch. This is a player that can see himself standing on the top of the mountain as one of the greatest players in the world. Jack, we can understand that players don't have great tournaments, but also, you can also back it up when the chips are down. That's a sign of a top player.
Yeah, he is absolutely brimming with main character energy. I actually can't really think of another England player who had that in the same way. Maybe Rooney, maybe Gerrard, maybe Beckham. But then I think that Bellingham, it's kind of Rooney-esque, like the number of massive moments he's had. He's only just turned 21 the other day.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think a lot of it probably stems from playing for Real Madrid as well, in the sense that Real Madrid, that is just the mentality of Real Madrid, isn't it? It doesn't matter if we play badly because we will score a goal at the end. And like so much of what Real Madrid have achieved in the last sort of 12 years has been built on that kind of mentality. And clearly Bellingham has really taken that on board over the course of his season there. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if we're not in the game, because in the biggest moments we will come good, and he's clearly brought that into the England camp. And that is an incredibly effective, that's an incredibly powerful mentality in tournament football, because tournament football is ultimately, it is decided by moments as much as it is decided by performances, and it's in those, it's in those kind of clutch moments. I think England have probably been a bit lacking in the last 5 or 6 years. They got themselves into good positions in 2018 and 2022 and Euro 2020, weren't able to make the most of them, and now they've got a player who thinks and acts a little bit differently.
I'd be interested to get both your perspectives on this. Bellingham did also speak about, the massive pile-on, it felt like, from fans, the pressures of playing for England and what sometimes that does to players. He talked about taking it personally as well. Do you think it was fair to criticise the fans in that way, Jacob?
I think what we sometimes forget about Jude Bellingham is that we're all still so new to him. A, he's 21. B, he's never played, or he hasn't played in England since he was 16, 17 for Birmingham City. A lot of people follow England for major tournaments, and so outside of that, won't see him playing regularly for Borussia Dortmund, for Real Madrid. They might not even be watching the Champions League, and in a way, sort of general coverage reflects that. And so when he has a couple of poor games, that will be the sum total of what a lot of people have seen of him. And so it means that reactivity will be even higher than it would be for a player who's almost in a way had more of their own narrative set. The only narrative we have about Bellingham is he's this demigod figure who scores and writes his own scripts. And yes, he's gone and done that now, but when there's anything which doesn't live up to that, people are going to react to it. It might not be fair if you look at his entire career so far, but because it's so scant, that's why people are going to react more extremely.
I think it's very indicative of his mentality that he thinks that he's been getting criticised and piled on in the last few weeks. Because as far as I'm aware, he's had quite very, very positive coverage over the course of sort of, I guess, 5 or 6 years since he came to prominence. And, you know, and rightly so. He's an unbelievably good player who's having a really exciting career and I think conducts himself very well. But the idea that he's been getting hammered by the critics, I think is fairly ridiculous. Like I know that there were, some people in the media were calling for him to perhaps were questioning how he works with Phil Foden and maybe it would be better to play one rather than the other. But I do not think he's been subject to unfair criticism. But I guess that's just that's quite a modern mentality, isn't it? To see, I think people are really inspired by, I don't know, Michael Jordan, in The Last Dance, where you can see that Jordan is almost like blowing up this sense that he's being criticised so he can turn it into personal motivation. I kind of feel like a lot of footballers and particularly young players look at that and kind of adopt that mindset because they think it can be helpful to them. And I just wonder if this is an example of that same phenomenon.
Let's move on to tactics. Does it look like England are playing with any real sort of tactics coming into this tournament? Because from the group stages to what we saw yesterday, especially the first half, I'm asking myself, how on earth are you getting the best out of this incredibly talented squad?
Yeah, England have got some great tactics. They got the tactic where Stones and then Walker and Gahey pass it to each other very slowly for about 5 minutes, and then Pickford hammers it 80 yards over everyone's head. They've got the tactic where they play a diagonal to their outlet running down the wing, which is a 33-year-old right back called Kieran Trippier who cuts back inside and loses the momentum. They got the tactic where they wait for a long time and then eventually pass the ball to Bukayo Saka at a point where he's got like 3 opponents swarming around him in his back and he's facing England's own goal and can't go anywhere with the ball. So yeah, they got some great tactics. And it's been 4 games getting used to them so far. And I'm really looking forward to seeing these tactics again in Düsseldorf on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, you also forget the tactic where leading goal scorer doesn't get a single pass in the first half of a major stage of the tournament.
They've also got the tactic where they have the ball for ages and never get a shot away.
That's the other one. Yeah.
That's maybe like the unifying tactic that brings it all together.
That's brilliant. I mean, Jacob, look, the substitutions are also fascinating. I mean, it took Gareth Southgate so long before he made a solid substitution, considering the team were performing under par. Was that surprising to you?
I was surprised he didn't make any changes at half time, given just how poor they were. And I get the I get the tactic of being like, well, here's a chance to fix it, go out and give me 10 minutes. But it's not like this game existed in a vacuum. It had previous games to actually show something. Sort of going on to Tony at the end, I mean, it worked really well because he still did create that moment of chaos. He created a cushioned header for Kane, but let's not pretend that this was some sort of master plan. This was a total move of desperation from him in the end. And in a way, other moves, such as sort of bringing on Eze with 10 minutes to go, just hope that he can sort of dribble at someone, it is a similar sort of pattern. There wasn't a sort of system there, as shown by sort of a weird formation we ended up in. It was just my player can beat your player, let's hope.
Jack, does that worry you, the lack of an evolution for this team since what we saw in the opening stages of this competition to where we are right now?
Well, look, I think there's clearly some big problems that he hasn't solved yet. Equally, I'm not sure he's really got the resources to solve them. Like he doesn't have a fit left back in the squad. He doesn't really have a sort of midfielder with the characteristics that he wants. Like he doesn't have someone who is good on the ball and can keep the ball and is good without the ball. Like Gallagher's good without the ball but not with the ball. Maid is good with the ball but not without the ball. Trent Alexander-Arnold is good with the ball but maybe not so good without the ball, I don't think, in midfield. It's not like he's got a Mason Mount player who can do both. So, he's certainly not got like a sort of, peak level Henderson or Phillips, as he said. So I just don't think he's really quite got the resources. I mean, I think he's made lots of mistakes over the last year or two that have brought us to this point, but I do have some sympathy with Gareth Southgate, which is that other than maybe playing Gordon or Palmer a bit more, I don't think even that, I don't think would solve all the problems that he's got in the team.
So for you, that midfield is a massive issue, but also, dare I say, you don't think I'm just trying to clarify it, you don't think he's got the personnel that he needs to play this fluid kind of football that we're all hoping he can play, Jack?
He certainly doesn't have a fit left back, which I think is a big issue. He doesn't really have a sort of Sterling Rashford type player, which I think is another big issue. He doesn't have a midfielder who well balances Rice and Bellingham. Because Bellingham's got so much main character energy, they need another midfielder who will do the dirty work. So, I mean, people laughed at Southgate when he said they miss Phillips, but they do miss Phillips. Or at least they missed the Phillips of 3 years ago from the last Euros, definitely. Massively. They miss Mount. So I think, and yeah, like people will say, he's got to play Gordon, hasn't he? And yeah, maybe Gordon would be better. And maybe he should play Palmer. Although, I don't know if I'd actually play Palmer over Saka. Mate, it's a kind of 50-50 call that. But I don't think that he has all of the players in the squad that he needs to play the sort of standard of football that people expect. So, of course, he's going to be looking for sticking plaster solutions.
Then brings me the question, Jacob. Then are we missing certain players? Harry Maguire, for instance, on set pieces. Are we missing a Rashford? If you're taking a half fit Luke Shaw, surely Marcus Rashford, that's semi fit, can offer you something. Should be in this England squad.
I think we've still got the players to be far more comfortable in this sort of game. And for me, one of the issues was just their kind of inability to problem solve once they did have these players out on the pitch. I mean, Slovakia managed to they tucked their right winger inside, which kind of forced England to build up through Trippier. And once that's what they did right from the start, packed midfield, forced England out to that side. And a kind of inability of England to work out another way to deal with that, whether it's kind of drop midfielders deeper and build up, or to have another bring Rice between the centre backs, to also bring your left winger deeper to give Trippier a bit more support. Kind of the complete absence of options there, which has led to this like sheer anathema, was the issue for me more than the personnel themselves. I think he probably had enough options to not have to rely on Jude Bellingham's last minute overhead kick.
Okay, let's look to Luke Shaw, who's not made an appearance yet in the tournament. I know he was named on the bench yesterday. Has it been a massive oversight, Jack, in bringing a player with this lack of fitness to this tournament? I know we are still lacking a left back, but isn't that more indicative of the system that we've got at this moment in time, that we've not been able to produce a solid enough left back that can play at this level?
It's not like there's no options. I mean, Ben Chilwell's not had an amazing season at Chelsea, but he's there. Tyrant Mitchell's had a decent season at Crystal Palace. He's there. They've got, I think that Southgate's kind of boxed himself into a corner a bit by saying his only option is a bloke who hasn't played since February. And I think we're now seeing the limitations of that, because, I mean, yesterday England had they had Saka at left wing back at one point, or they had Saka at left back. They had Eberechi.
Which a lot of people have been calling for.
Me included.
There,
right? So I can't complain about that. But they had and then Eberechi Eze went to left wing back. And you think, how is this if Eze is a better option than Shaw for extra time in that role, then that really says quite a lot about how unready Shaw must be. And Southgate said yesterday, he just needs a bit more training this week, and then they can see what level he's at. But I mean, clearly they've taken a huge punt and it hasn't come off yet. So yeah, I think again Southgate has, particularly given he's got a 26-man squad, why not take a Chilwell or a Mitchell or somebody else who definitely can play in that position? I don't really get it.
Yeah, Jacob, yeah, okay, let's say Luke Shaw is fit. I mean, you are now entering one of the deadliest stages of the competition. Like, what use is a player that's barely played in the tournament? Just putting him in that situation. Is he even going to be match ready for that intensity?
There's clearly been an error here in terms of understanding quite how injured Luke Shaw was. I mean, it's been 4 games now. The fact that when England were looking for a left back, he wasn't even an option. He didn't warm up at any point that I saw during the evening. And Ezri Konsa ended up filling in there. So the idea that, yes, he's got another 6 days to recover, but the idea he's gone from not even warming up, not even being an emergency option, because if he didn't even an emergency option, this certainly qualified as an emergency. The fact he wasn't even there for him to start a game in 6 days' times, I cannot see it happening at all.
Okay, well, England face Switzerland in the quarterfinals of the Euros, and Switzerland beat Italy convincingly on Saturday. Should England be worried, Jack?
Yes. Switzerland are really good. They're really good. They're like a really well organised team. They're aggressive. They kind of play as a unit. I think this tournament is kind of showing up there's a difference between teams who are just the sort of sum of their parts, or basically just a list of players on a page, and teams who are actually really well organised. It's why like Georgia being so impressive, Austria being so impressive. I actually think, and I think Switzerland are kind of in that mould. Like, yeah, they've got good individual players, but Yakin's made them a really well organised unit. And I just think they'll exploit England's problem. I think all the things that England are bad at, they can't play through a press. I think England are actually looking increasingly vulnerable on the break, which is not a problem I thought we'd have at this tournament. England don't turn possession to chances. I just think we're probably going to come up against a tactically superior team. And I am, unless we see some radical rethink from England this week, I am not optimistic about Saturday's game.
Yeah, of course. Mark Guehi's also not going to be playing because he picked up a yellow card in yesterday's match, and he's out of that game. Jacob, who do you see coming in that position to solidify? Because also we talk about defensive lapses of concentration yesterday. John Stones didn't seem quite on it in that first half either. Who sits next to him?
It's pretty open. It feels like Ezri Konsa has been the first sort of name who's sort of come in. I think he's probably played the most minutes off the bench. I suppose some of it's kind of what you want in terms of sort of psychologically, who do you want partner? Do you sort of go for a character like Lewis Dunk, who's kind of seen lots of stuff? Do you go for probably the raw ability of Konsa? I mean, Joe Gomez is another option. And I mean, the fact we haven't talked about him so much as a left back option, considering he's played so much there for Liverpool. I mean, that's another option which Gareth Southgate has in front of him. But I mean, just looking ahead to Switzerland, I mean, I watched their first 2 games in Cologne, and the fact that their strength kind of so far has been midfield, where Granit Xhaka and Remo Freuler both have shouts of being the team of the tournament. I mean, it really is quite troubling, seeing as that will come up directly against England's own problem area. One thing that really, it just really bothers me, and especially when people talk about imbalance, is that actually, Jack, I don't think all teams that do well in these tournaments have to be balanced, but it's that collectiveness that's really important. I mean, you look at Greece, right? When they won the Euros, they didn't really have a recognisable striker. They were barely scoring goals. You look at when Portugal won it, that probably wasn't their best football, but collectively they turned up. How do we get this England team to collectively turn up? Because, of course, you might not have everything you need to your disposal, but it's a mindset shift, surely.
Yeah, it's a really good question, isn't it? Is the problem just like a sum of all the tactical issues with the team, or is it some kind of fundamental issue of chemistry? Because my sense is that the chemistry is actually pretty good. Like, I think the England players are pretty happy. I think the spirit will be massively improved by this result. I don't think they're hating life in Blankenheim at all. But I think that there's like a long list of tactical problems. And these tactical problems make it look as if the chemistry is really off. Like we talked about the bad body language yesterday, players shouting at each other, players shrugging at each other. So I think that they're going to have to solve those tactical problems over the course of the week, because those tactical problems are going to be exploited far more effectively by Switzerland than by Slovakia. Like Slovakia was so close to beating us yesterday, and it's not even just about 1-0. Like they had some good chance in the first half. They had that long range lob over Pickford where after that quick free kick, which was about a yard or two away from winning the game for them 2-0. So England could easily have lost, and now they're going to be coming up against a team who is more experienced, got more technical ability in the team, probably a bit more confidence than Slovakia had. So yeah, I mean, I do think that you need togetherness to win a tournament, and I'm not maybe England do have that, but I also think they've got a long list of fires that they need to put out.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's see what happens as England take on Switzerland in the next round of the Euros. Jacob, thank you so much for your time. Yeah, don't forget to rate and review the podcast. We've also got post-match reaction from the Totally Football Show, and also the Daily Football Briefing is there every morning for a bite-sized roundup of the day's news. Thank you so much for listening. We're back tomorrow. If you want to watch more episodes of the show, please subscribe to the channel. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the season. If you'd like to listen to the episodes in full in audio form, search The Athletic FC wherever you get your podcasts from.